check, mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 1, 2, mic check. Good morning. Welcome to Community Voice. I'm your host, Keith Parris. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. Good morning, Debo. Good morning, Jermaine. Good morning, Michelle.
Top of the morning, sir.
Never would have paid it.
Without you locking the door.
Never would have paid it.
Oh, you saw that? You saw that guy do that? Yeah, he was like, he got a message.
Lord. Oh, Lord.
I think that's very distasteful for how he did it. I understand what he was trying to get across, but how he did it.
What you mean? What he trying to get across?
Well, he was really saying from him being on the Ricky Smiley show, he was saying that when he said that it cost, he was saying like as far as like the conferences and all of that other stuff to keep the lights on and
what
all
did
of
he
those
mean
stuff.
when he said, those of you that's sitting up here, and it costs to sit up here?
Well,
oh yeah, that was the $100.
well, that part,
folks.
yeah, that was for those preachers that he was saying it cost. Now,
Just in case folks don't know what we're talking about, Bishop Marvin Sapp has gone viral. He locked the doors of his church to take up an offering. He's trying to raise $40,000. It must have been for the children.
I don't even think it was at his church. It was at a conference because his church is small.
Okay, so even at the conference, but
Yeah.
he was doing it for the children, right?
I don't know who he was doing it for, but I just think it was distasteful. He could have did it a better way because it brings a reproach on the church that's doing right. So for all those other churches that might use offering, as a scheme for those churches that are doing right, when you see stuff like that, it make people question who's authentic and who's not.
Well, and maybe it's now look, the lights don't stay on by faith.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, I get all of that. You know, churches have overhead.
Yeah.
And so it really depends on, I guess, where you are in the spectrum. We have gone from this idea, and I don't know if we've always had hustlers in the pulpit. There's no question about that. I mean, we can go back to Father Divine, Sweet Daddy Grace, Bishop Jones up in Detroit. And then, the guy that got on television was Reverend Ike. Yeah. So we've all, and look, in the 80s and 90s, there was this shift from maybe piety to prosperity and that, people going in and they're making the argument about naming and claiming. So, and Dr. King warned us about materialism. He was talking about in society, but certainly in the church. So it is an interesting dynamic, or not to say interesting dynamic. It is a tension there in terms of people going in and what it looks like. Now, look, some people who already had hostility towards the church is going to use this as a reason. It's why I don't go to church in the first place, because they're always asking for money. And again, like I said, tongue in cheek, is he raising money for for children? Is he raising money for mission? Is he raising money for charity?
Keith, I think there's a better way though, because as elders, what have you, you can have a meeting. You can send out a group text to all the elders, so you don't have to publicly get up there and say it costs $100 to sit up here.
Well, I don't think he was saying. I don't think he was saying, man, that it costs $100 to sit there. He was just saying that for the preachers, he wanted the preachers to give $100, but then he tied in after he said that it costs to sit up here. Now you can look at that. Hold on.
So then, what does it mean?
I'm about to say. Now I don't know exactly what he meant, but you can look at that from different ways. Saying that it costs to sit up there, you can look at it from the lens of, okay, well, and I know this is gonna sound kind of controversial, but you can look at it from the lens of, well, I'm in position and I'm the leader of my flock.
So then he should have had a check for $1,000.
Well, no, I mean, that's why I said that it's really a thin line of how you can spin it, because I really think it was just word salad. Like after he asked for the preachers and asked them to give $100, because he asked for some people to give $20, but when he turned around for the preachers, it was more like the expectation of giving. He was saying is more on the preachers than it is for the
Just
congregation.
because I'm a preacher don't mean I got $100.
Hold on, I get it, but that's why I said it was distasteful, and it could have been done better, because after he said that he wanted the preachers to give $100, because which in reality, those cats that was up there was preachers and I mean was pastors and bishops, and the majority of them had the $100.
That ain't the point.
Well,
I know, but
I gotta tread kind of
Yeah,
lightly
yeah,
on this piece, because I understand that every institution has its cost,
right.
right? But when you look, I'll never forget, I was watching Eric Vaughn did this interview. I don't know if it's when he was on Black Nouveau or he was on Channel 12. He interviewed 3 pastors who had churches in the Northwest Quarter. I'm not going to name those churches, but 3 churches in the Northwest Quarter, which for Black folks at that time was like one of the fastest growing areas for Black folks. Eric, people can remember that when you went out to McGovern Park back in the day, that used to be way out.
Yeah.
McGovern Park feels like it's in the middle of the city now. So when churches started building, there was land out there that they could build on. So they would go out and they would build. So he was just having a conversation. I don't think he was trying to put them, on blast or anything. And he asked him, he says, so what percentage of your finances goes to community stuff, mission work? And they said, well, about 10%. Now, from a person who's come from a social service background, the question, because even I heard someone talking about the amount of money that's spent on a campaign, couldn't that money be spent to help communities? The reality is that we have, there's an inward looking piece of our faith, which should be more outward. If we follow the example of Jesus, follow the example of Jesus, this idea of what we're supposed to do for the poor, what we're supposed to do for those folks, that is the purpose of the church. But I think that sometimes we become so self-absorbed and so just self-absorbed. It was this word that stuck out in Dr. Williams' book. He talks about salvic. We so stuck on salvation and us that we don't realize that it really is about how do we be this voice? How do we deal with issues in this world? And I think that becomes just another example of it. And like I said, and I'm not calling him a hustler. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, and even look, if you do a conference, I like to think that part of you figured out everything you need to do, selecting the venue, paying for the venue, paying the honorariums for the people who were involved, all the stuff that should be factored into the cost that you charge me to even be part of that conference.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. I just know that for me, being around it, being in the church and seeing that side of the business, it can get sketchy.
Yeah.
I know I had a situation that happened to me. I'm not going to say the church name because that doesn't matter, but it was a situation that it came down to tithes and offering. And I'm a hired musician, right? So they hired me. And this one particular Sunday, the pastor came to me and said, we've been looking at your giving, your tithing, and what you've been giving to the church. And he said it don't add up to what we've been giving you. So this is what I said to him. I said, well, my dad's a pastor, and I send my tithes down to his church. This man looked at me and said, when you get sick, you have them pray for you, and walked away from me. Yeah, she said, ooh, no, but seriously. And I stood there and I looked at him and I said, I do have them pray for me. Like, man, that's my mama and daddy, because he was trying to, I'm your spiritual father. No, you ain't my spiritual father. My daddy is my daddy, and if I need any spiritual guidance, I'm gonna either go to the Bible for myself or I'm gonna ask him things like, I don't need no spiritual father. And this whole thing that everybody was picking up from this Bill Winston movement that, oh, I'm your spiritual father. No, you're not.
And people like Pastor Winston, who I think his background is business, and what we bring to the sacred vocation is what our experiences have been in our secular vocation, right?
Yeah.
So, if social services was your thing, chances are you're going to be more about social
Exactly.
services. If education was your thing, you're going to be more about
education.
education. If business is your thing, you're going to be more about business. But here's the problem with Bill Winston. Bill Winston convinced his congregants to buy a bank.
Exactly.
And they didn't know, and there were factors going on. Look, if they're able to sell you a bank, that means that bank is in distress. That means that bank is more susceptible to market trends, certainly in the negative. The reason why we saw a big decrease in black banks around 2008, 2009 was many of those black banks, including Legacy Bank here, North Milwaukee State Bank here. These two banks we had, because at one point we had 3 black-owned financial institutions, right? But part of it was their portfolio was Fannie Mae. When the housing thing happened, there was no way that they could go in. That money was not insured, and so they lost a whole lot. Or if you look at the portfolio of North Milwaukee State Bank, I remember going to a couple they would do appreciations for churches. A lot of what they were doing was church bills, right? So mortgages that churches could come out and they would tell you that churches, if you're looking at doing a mortgage, is a better bet, in terms of, because those folks are going to pay off that church usually. So it was the finance piece with that. And then there's the whole social justice piece that churches may or may not involve themselves in for whatever reasons. Certainly not the Johnson Act. Everybody knows the Johnson Act says the churches cannot be partisan. You can't endorse candidates, things like that. But churches are political, and there's a difference between being partisan and political. What happens in the world will impact that church. It certainly impacts the congregants. And so this level of awareness or community involvement. But you know what it comes down to, man? Cash rules everything around me.
Dollar bill. So I want to ask you, how do you feel about churches making people pay tithes? Because
I think tithing is a fair way for contributions. 10% is 10%. So 10%. Now, good. 10% for me might be lower than 10% for you because you a baller. Man, but it don't matter. It's 10%. And so we all equally, it hits us equally. That 10% was in the Bible in terms of that seemed to be more equitable, that we do it across the board, whether you had a little, whether you had a lot, it was 10%. I had my pastor before Pastor Wanzo, Dr. Kelly, believed in tithing. He didn't want us selling any chicken dinners. He didn't want any sales going on in the church. He felt like if people tithe and you do what you do and you do it. Now, look, they said that the average contribution or percentage of income that people do for contributing to church is about 5%. So it's not even 10%.
It ain't even 10%, yeah.
And then you will have, what about those instances where, so it depends on how financially situated your church is. If you have a church that's a very middle class, very well in terms, but even then, we'll spend more on outfits, than we will in terms of an offering.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of go out, you can see certain churches where you might have a white church, black church, similarly situated in terms of education, professional income, and then look at the difference.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's cultural. It came up, like what people should wear to church. Well, if we put such an emphasis on what you wear to church, that costs money. So does the question becomes, do I then say that maybe, and again, I've been hypocritical on this, and my wife's in training, so she's not even hearing, but she would call me a hypocrite, because I spend an enormous amount of time on my fits, right? I want to,
you want to look right.
I want to look right.
Yeah.
I ain't right, but I want to look right. So I think that it's a lot, but when it's how do we finance it? And then there's lifestyles, right? And what should a pastor's lifestyle be? That would depend on the church and what that church is able to do.
Yeah.
You look at churches that have that, like I said, are doing very well. They're very highly educated, high income. It's a little bit different in terms of but then the professional and educational requirements are going to be very different. So if I'm applying for Abyssinian Baptist Church there in Harlem, because Abyssinian is such a prestigious pulpit, they have a certain educational expectation that they have. And then your income is going to be directly related to what that church is able to do.
Right.
Now, the challenge for us is over and beyond what we do internally. And I started it off with this: what is our external responsibility? And that's where sometimes it becomes, look, I'm very happy about the fact that I see more and more Black clergy getting involved with issues around justice in the community. But cash rules everything around me. And so depending on where your income source comes from, it could have an impact on where you politically stand.
Of course, because you don't want to rock the boat.
Right. Well, and you're not going to cut off the hand that feeds you, right? Course. And so that, but it's one of those things in our community where, and look, there are a lot of, I know Ricky Dillard came as part of Get Out the Vote. Remember he had come. I just happened to, he did a concert, or he was at a concert right after the election. I've never heard Ricky Dillard. I wasn't there when he was on 60th and Capitol. I'd never heard him kind of be political. But he said before he started, I know a lot of y'all are mad. And that's real talk. There were a lot of people who were very, very angry. And there were people who, and certainly gets us back to election day today. You what did Obama say? He said Trump, and people started booing. He said, don't boo, vote. That you can get all in your feelings and you get mad, but one of the things that you have in your hand is your vote. There are going to be people getting their hair done today, people going to the barber shop today. I got all of that. I used to have this suggestion, barbershops and beauty shops should close on election day. Let people, but then they out trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. Right. So, but how important it is. And then we'll sit up and then we have these regrets like, oh man. And then if you sit up here and think it don't impact you, let's talk about the brother who's getting SNAP benefits, and they're talking about now cutting SNAP benefits. It does impact you.
Surprise.
Right. And then let me say this, and I know that there's been brothers who still on paper, and they're out organizing, trying to get people out to vote. And they said, look, I can't vote, but you can. Vote for me, because I can't vote. So, we just can't be like ostriches and stick our head in the sand and act like the danger is going to go away. The danger is not going to go away. And if the little that I do, those 5 little smooth stones that I might have, might be my vote. And so people need to be mindful of that. It is election day. When I was picking up donuts this morning, I saw people who had gone to vote already and was coming in picking up their donuts. So it's election day. And like Michelle said, the people who listen to us tend to vote. People who might listen to the truth tend to vote. But I don't know about the people necessarily who are listening to V100 or 98.3. It's still at a point where you need to get out and vote. And look, and let me say this because, and again, I'm only saying this at 35,000 feet. I have my own parochial self-interest here at WNOV, but I do know that we have a certain demographic. But Jammin has a certain demographic. And so the question becomes, how does Jammin see themselves as part of the community? And what are you doing in terms of education? Because, my mother used to say this. She said, look, young people want to hear music. Yeah. They don't want to hear all this, man, we need to be about this and we need to be about that. But they're just as impacted as other folks. You're listening to Community Voice Election Day in the City. It's election day in the city. If you haven't voted, you need to get out and vote. I know that this has been, this turnout in terms of early voting has been, they talked about Washington County, they had 167% increase in the number of people who did early voting. You listen to Community Voice. Hey, the phone line's open, y'all. 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Going to take a quick break and be right back.
Donald Trump is out of control, stopping payments for healthcare and food for hungry kids, eliminating the Department of Education, and letting Elon Musk access your most private information. Now Trump and Musk are backing Brad Schimmel because they know he'll let them do whatever they want. Not Judge Susan Crawford. She'll be the check and balance we need to protect us from Trump when he goes too far. That's why we need Judge Susan Crawford on the Supreme Court.
AM and 106.5 FM with your host, Keith Parris.
All right, welcome back to Community Voice. And again, the phone lines are open. It's Election Day, 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Let me shout out the good folks yesterday, Milwaukee County Child Support Services, Fathers Making Progress, all the other different groups, different agencies that came together yesterday for the Back on Track program for men there at the King Center. I know we had more than 300 fathers there. They gave away 250 laptops, but just incredible. I know when I left the station, it started at 10. I left the station right after I got off the program, and man, I'm telling you, cars were parked, man, all the way down to down 17th Street, all in Valete, the parking lots. It was packed, and of course, because I love all African people all over the world, all the illegally parked people. I don't know why people think they just gonna be able to run in. You're not gonna be able to run in, man. And so but man, they got there. And so shout out the good folks there at Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services. They got get used to saying that child support used to be its own standalone department. And now it's part of the Department of Health and Human Services. So certainly Director LeGrand, Administrator there, Mr. Artist Landon, and all those folks be able to do it. They had the vision to be out in the community. Yeah. It was something that I hadn't even thought about, and I hadn't read the disclaimer on the flyer. And I've been working now with child support for about 14 years. They really working hard and trying to change the perception of child support. And one of the things that was, I didn't think it was a thing, but I guess it really was a thing, was that they put a disclaimer on that people didn't have to worry about being arrested.
Yeah, because I saw on the internet they have this they did this a few years ago, that they tricked people with football tickets.
Yeah. Oh, this goes back to 80s, 90s. People with warrants. Yeah. And they invite you in. You could rent a free TV.
Oh man,
vacation.
Yeah. And they take you to the back
room.
They
walk you right in the back room.
Yeah.
And so they were discussing it. And then there was a sheriff deputy doing just his rotation, going through. And there's always a righteous woke brother. So, of course, the righteous woke brother focused in on him. Now, by the time that brother had gotten there, the deputy had gotten there, we were winding down. We actually did go to 4 yesterday. That's how many people were serviced. And so now they're having this discussion around this issue of, brothers not feeling safe, because they come in and the police going to arrest them. And I'm going, no, man. And so the fact that we have to put the disclaimer out there, let me say this. If you have a bench warrant, resolve it.
Run.
Go down, resolve it, because usually, and understanding what a capias is, or a bench warrant, is basically get you to appear in court. That is what it is. Now, when you got a capias, the body, where they, you got a bond.
Yeah, you have to.
You gonna sit.
Yeah,
you gonna sit. Yeah. But if that's an issue out there, usually those warrants are out there because you did not appear in court. They're trying to get you to appear. Look, at some point you're going to appear in court,
one way or another.
One way or the other. So if that's an issue, get it resolved. Get the court hearing, go on and resolve. Take care of your business. You're going to find out it's not as painful.
Well, I'm gonna say this: if you do have a bench warrant, make sure you turn yourself in on a Monday, so at least you'll be home by Wednesday or Thursday. Boy, if you do it on a Thursday or Friday, I'll holler at you next week.
That's like, catching it on Friday night. You gonna be there. Don't let it be like a holiday weekend. You ain't out of there until Tuesday.
Yeah, that's why I say, hey man, turn yourself in Sunday night.
Yeah, I look, and I did a night in the county lockup. It wasn't bad. I mean, I not like Rikers.
Man, try 23-1.
I know, but
try that.
I know at 5 a.m. when that coffee and bologna came.
I
would ooh.
See, but
I don't think they do that anymore. But
no, they do. Well, when you in 23-1, that the 5 o'clock roll call, they if you miss that call, you don't get out your cell. You don't get a chance to eat. So you in your cell for the whole day because you missed that 5 o'clock count.
Yeah, thank God for freedom.
Man, man. That's why I say, hey, man,
thank God for freedom.
I ain't never going back, man. I love my freedom.
Man, you go out, man, and I don't know. I know we do work down at we not so much since COVID, but we used to be out at what is that? What is it now? The old House of Correction now is
the HOC.
Yeah, but it's not HOC anymore. It's the readjustment.
Readjustment. Yeah, my foot.
But they changed the name. Even the House of Correction was kind of an interesting name, because the House of Correction is kind of really it's kind of rooted in where the word penitentiary came from, which was like penance, and that you'd have time to reflect on your behavior. And so no, that's what I thought. It's Community Reintegration Center. And so people out there, and we spend time there, Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility. Yep. Dude, now when those doors close, oh man, it is.
Yeah, I remember my first time when that first happened, and I walked inside of a building. So there was no way to escape. One, there's no sunlight. Yep. Two, and when they close those big doors behind you, and you just look and see everybody that's free, that's on the opposite side of that door, you like, oh my God, it's just a feeling that I can't explain, but I never want to feel that feeling. And I'm not going to ever feel that feeling again, because I'm not going to put myself in position to feel that.
Yeah, and I tell people I ain't built for prison.
Doc.
So man. No, but be able to get out, to go, but we did time.
Yeah, I say, hey, hold on.
In the 14 years that I've been doing this, working with fatherhood, man, I know at least 10,000 people, right? I mean, that this program has touched in some way. And there was a brother who was at the King Center yesterday, and he said, hey, what up, man? What up, man? Remember me, don't you? Yeah, dude, I remember you when you was out at the house. So be able to, did you visit me when I was in prison?
Wow.
But yeah, I and so the work that we did, somewhat, it was good work, and certainly the director now of the Community Reintegration Center, Chantel, she's done a marvelous job in terms of that, and they've always had, except when the House of Correction fell under David Clark. When it fell under David Clark, Jeff, for that moment, it was like, first of all, many people who are at the House of Correction have not been convicted of a crime, which means they can still vote if they're not on paper already. So you have that piece of it. This idea of due process and justice, a lot of times where we've already convicted the individual. That's the issue they're having right now when you go in and say that you have these gangs and they get no hearing. You just automatically just kick them out the country, even if they do have rights. And maybe America, one of the unique things about its criminal justice system, or its justice system, but certainly the criminal justice part of our justice system, is that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. And that the state has a high bar because they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed this crime. So you should have due process. We all want due process. We all want justice. I think it's easy for people emotionally to say, well, if they're gang members and they're from another country, they shouldn't be here. That may be true. But the problem with that slippery slope is that right now with the racial because the people that they're talking about either deporting or taking away special immigration status tend to be people of color.
So my question, or two questions. one, is it a crime to be a part of a gang? Two, there's not only Mexicans and blacks that's a part of a gang. You have white people that's a part of a gang. Skinheads, all of these other, and some of these white people are illegal, but they're not checking into them. They're not looking at their green cards.
It's the okie doke. We talked about it yesterday. You're over here focusing on so-called the others, and you're getting raped and pillaged in terms of what's going on with you.
Yeah.
You know, so it's easy to sit up and go like, oh, it's them until it's you.
And
some of us look like Caribbeans.
Yeah, yeah. And to be honest, man, when you look at some of these crimes that's happening with the people that's going into these schools and shooting and all these other crimes, it's not the Mexicans.
It's not illegal immigrants.
At
it's
all.
American citizens.
It's American citizens,
yeah. I mean, so anyway, so you have now until 8:00 if you haven't voted to get out and vote. It's a beautiful day to get out and vote. I know I came down Sherman Boulevard this morning, and there are people saw people going to Washington High School to vote. But again, a lot of people have voted already. They just talked about it's just been over. We just had a midterm election 2 years ago, or what we call like off-term election, and I don't know. I'm not gonna. I've been really wrestling with this in terms of the fact that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have injected themselves into this race here in Wisconsin for Supreme Court. I don't know if that might not be a blessing in disguise, because this quickly, we would have thought that we would have had to wait to the midterms to really voice dissatisfaction with the direction that this administration is going. But I think that there's a clear message. There's also 2 special elections that they're having down in Florida. These were reliable Trump kind of dominated areas. And now one race, I know the race with Fine is really competitive. That's the race to Phil Walsh's, who's his seat. And it's more competitive. I mean, to the point that it's within the margin of errors.
Yeah.
So that race shouldn't even been on being competitive. But you know what you're saying with town hall meetings, where people in deeply red districts are going in and just reaming out their congressperson, to the point that congressional leadership has said, do not go and have town hall meetings because the anger out there is such. And so, at least in Wisconsin, people will be able to, because maybe this becomes a proxy election, that people will be able to say, hey, this is where we are. We saw it in 2016. No, not 2016. We saw it in 2018 when in that August-November election, where big turnout. And again, the over 500,000 people had voted early as of Friday. They talked about that there has been an increase in Milwaukee County. I think Milwaukee County is over 56% increase. Washington County, we're talking about now early voting, because in usually Republican-leaning districts, they tend to want to do same day. Donald Trump has come out so-called against early voting, even though he does early voting, but it's not good for anybody but him. Dems saw this in 2020, where they were able to turn out folks who did early voting, and so we'll see. And then even the early voting that we saw in the November election here in Wisconsin. So if you haven't voted, you still have time to vote. Have 8:00. You can go to My Vote to find out where you are, where your registration is. I had a chance to go in and check. We did our mail-in ballots, and so we were going to check to see my mom's ballot had been received, mine and my wife's ballot has been received. You got young folks there in your home, tell them get out and vote. Tell them get out and vote. It's important. Caller, welcome to the program.
Let me turn the radio down. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right out there, I have to turn my speaker off. Right out there, something important that I want to tell Miss Michelle show earlier today, but I didn't get a chance when they were talking about these gangs here with the Venezuelans. Mm-hmm. What about these Russian gangs here with these Russians that's over here illegally? Right. What are you hearing about that? Nothing. And matter of fact, I did a little research the other day, and I said on Google and named the different gangs in the United States. I don't know how to say it, but every race or every nationality, Keith, have gangs in the United States.
Right.
I don't care if you're black, white, Asian. I don't care what color you're. Everybody's got gangs. So, but why only gangs of color? And I don't mean like black gangs, because I don't think he's really going after black gangs. He's just going with the ones that I don't know if they're all Hispanic, but you know what I'm saying, the Venezuelans and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, today they admitted that they snatched a young man up, right? That they took him out of here illegally. They're admitting this on this one guy, but they're saying they can't get him back. But you can negotiate with Russia and all them to get people back. That he can't make a call to the president of Venezuela and say, hey, we made a mistake. We need to get this guy back home.
I don't know. It seems to me that if you have gang activity in a particular area, it would be malfeasance on the part of law enforcement if they know, and in fact, that gang exists, and that you've done nothing to either break up that gang. And certainly if they're not in this country legally, then what do you do to round them up, give them a hearing, and then have them deported? I think that it is what it is performative. It looks like we're out, and then it's others. It's that nativism that people, subscribe to here in America, where, it's about us. And here's the reality. With the exception of indigenous people, all of us this is not our indigenous home. Africans came here involuntarily. Other groups came here voluntarily, but this is not my ancestral home.
None of us.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's easy to go after people of color. I was joking, like one particular caller, I said, dude, you look Venezuelan. So let's just say they pick you up and take your behind directly to El Salvador and see how easy it is for you to, get back. So
right, because Michelle asked him a question this morning, right? He hummed, but he never could answer the question. And I've been thinking the last couple of days, because I'm like thinking, okay, he sees what's going on now, and over 70 days now, and he sees what's going on. And I'm like, these people ain't got enough yet. Don't they know how this is going to affect their lives? It just ain't going to touch other people. It's going to affect your life too. So what are you thinking? What are you seeing that you still stand behind this man? Because I'm like, wonder how anybody.
Hello?
Oh, I heard the music. I didn't know if you had cut me off or that.
No, we're good.
How anybody can stand behind this guy after 60 or 70 days, what he's doing, and you still got people standing up behind this guy. And I'm going to get off with this. When he calls somebody deranged and lunatic, y'all look up the words. Y'all look that up and see what that means. He's talking about himself. When you look up deranged and lunatic, he's speaking about himself, y'all. Thank you, Keith.
I appreciate you. All right, you're listening to Community Voices Election Day in the City. 414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Call ICU. I'm going to grab you after the break. We'll be right back.
Here's your updated forecast. We'll see increasing cloud cover here for today with a high in the low 40s. Winds out of the east around 5 to 15 miles per hour. Then for tonight, a good chance for some rain showers, possibly mixing with some snow at times. Cloudy skies, a low near 35. By Wednesday, a chance for showers and thunderstorms. Cloudy.
Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, yes. I was talking to one of my parts salesmen the other day, and I kind of gave him a loaded question. I asked him what did he think about the administration that was in there, and he started saying, I'm glad they're there. They're going to make America great again. I said, hold your horses, sir. Hold your horses. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. Me being the man I am and what I've seen and what I've experienced. United States I said, it's never been great for the black folk, but it's been blessed because of us. I said, what are you saying is that let's make it racist again. And he said, what you mean by that? And I started explaining some things that I've been through and the things and how they come at us and what's going on in the administration today. I said, none of that is L toward the Caucasian. None of that is L to break you guys down, but it is affecting some of you guys, but it's L towards the black and brown people. And he turned so many different colors of red. Their fangs hanging out. They're doing a lot of things. And I hope these people, instead of looking at this, somebody come to me not long ago saying, hey, they're going to give us $5,000. I said, man, listen, they can give you $20,000. It's not enough to jump ship and vote for them. Because what they do, this administration is doing is going to cost us a lot over years and maybe a few decades to get it back in order or get it better, even though some things we needed a change on some things. But for this, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, I don't think so. You guys have a good one.
All right. Appreciate you. Caller, welcome to the program.
Well, good morning. First of all, some people like to be controlled by people who are non-black, but your gangs is white supremacy. Your gangs is these homegrown terrorists with all that hate. We have a wannabe gang leader who is a nigger from Africa, who should be in Africa, that's causing 126,000 people to lose jobs in D.C. with 4,000 homes going on the market, when he needs to be trying to take care of his own kids, considering his first baby died because it was with the nannies and not with him. So that is the problem. And also I wanted to share with you with the RFJK. He made a statement that people died from AIDS because they was using poppers. What I thought was kind of funny is, why would a man like him know about poppers? People died from AIDS from unprotected sex, but he never talked about, considering he was a junkie with them chitlin varicose veins, and he never revealed how those heroin addicts was dying from sharing needles, and they was not using hot water and bleach to clean them needles while they sticking them in the sides of them toilet papers and them cheap motels. But what I need y'all to understand, some of these people choose to be dumb. They're not dumb. They choose to be dumb. And the reason why some of them was raised that way, because their mother and father didn't have enough to make the cut. So what they did is took their baggage and put it on their child because they didn't want them to have wisdom, growth, and diversity. And also remember, them evangelists who always want to quote them Bible scriptures, them are the most evil, worthless niggas that grace this earth. That's why they never talk about them pedophilia. There's a German Shepherd walking around here right now with a diaper, but they all down. Well, some of them is down with that Christopher Columbus stuff, but they'll tell you how to live your life, and that dog will never be right after that Republican night. Have a good night or a good day. My bad. Bye-bye.
414-444-5250, 414-444-5250. Yeah, and as we're deporting people or kicking people out the country or extracting them from the country, the Trump administration has set up a resettlement office in South Africa because I guess there's been a whole new piece where land is being given more to indigenous South Africans. And so the white Afrikaners, they want to bring them here and let them resettle because they've lost land that they should have never had in the first place. Okay. I'm just saying. And just so people may or may not remember this little bit of history, the apartheid system that they used in South Africa was based on what we did here in America. Just wanted to pitch that little piece off. If you don't understand that piece of it, it was also used in terms of exterminating Jews in Europe during World War II. The same thing that that same system of segregation and how we go in and separate people. It was interesting when I was listening to the interview that the last interview Michelle did on her program, and y'all help me with this. There have been studies that show that, for example, for girls in mathematics and science, if they see a woman who is teaching or who's the teacher in that class, that it becomes aspirational for them, that they can see themselves going into math and going into science. They talk about, because when you look at the number of actual Black teachers that teach Black students, I think MPS had a higher percentage. There's something like 16%, but then you need to put that in perspective where over 80% of the school population are people of color. And so there was part of me that was saying that, and maybe it's a key thing, it didn't really matter so much what the teacher looked like, to me, as much as what I got and learned from that teacher. Now, I was very fortunate in some levels to have 2 Black male teachers in elementary school. I had 2. I had the late Bradley Carr, and I had Mr. Sharp when I was at what was then Victor Berger, which is kind of rare because there were a lot of Black students who didn't even see certainly Black male teachers on the elementary level. I saw more Black male teachers when I got to Parkman. And so, but and maybe trying to understand the sociology behind that, the psychology behind that, where people, but, for me, it was always, look, the reason why I became so accomplished in reading over and beyond what my mom did was a teacher, Mr. Sternberg, I had at Fifth Street School, who really encouraged us to read. We did flashcards where, we would do these multisyllabic words, and I was probably 2nd, 3rd grade. It just had so much impact on my life. So I don't understand that in terms of it makes a difference. Now, it used to be that's what we had. All we had were Black teachers, right? Because of the hyper segregation of the school systems, and certainly in the South and in the North, if you're a Black teacher, you're going to teach at a Black school, a school that's predominantly Black. So I just wondered what people think. It was my thing is I can learn from anybody. Caller, welcome to the program.
Yeah, I know that's right. I can too.
Good
morning. Yep.
You got your phone on you?
Yep.
Read to the people what I just sent to you about Elon Musk. It's gonna blow their mind. And also, he's probably a citizen now, if I'm not mistaken. But him and his brother overstayed their visa.
Yeah.
So they shouldn't have been here. They should have been sent back to South Africa. But so him and Donald Trump are about to say, what did Donald Trump 5 times since he had bone spurs?
Mm-hmm.
Read what, because in South Africa, it's mandatory that you go into the military. So just read to the people real quick what he did to get out of it. Thanks.
You sent me a Wikipedia? Let's see. Wealthy doing Elon's route, despite after his parents' divorce, chose to live primarily. Let's see. Later regretted the decision, became estranged from his father, and recounted trips to the wilderness. Elon was thrown out of concrete steps, beaten severely, leading him to be hospitalized. Boy had just lost his father to Elon called him stupid. Elon tended to call people stupid. I'm trying to see where it had anything with his military. I see he does have degrees from the University of Pennsylvania. Must hail to he enrolled. I don't see in here where it says he didn't do military service, but okay. Oh, here we go. Must apply for a Canadian passport through his Canadian-born mother to avoid South Africa's mandatory military service, which had forced him to participate in the apartheid regime, as well as ease his path to immigration to the United States. While waiting for his application to be processed, he attended the University of Pretoria for 5 months. He arrived in Canada in June 1989, connected with a second cousin in Saskatchewan, worked odd jobs, Queensland, and then he went into Although Musk has said that he earned his degrees in 1995, the University of Pennsylvania did not award them until 1997. A Bachelor of Arts in Physics and a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the university's Wharton School of Business. He reportedly hosted large ticketed house parties to help pay for tuition, wrote a business plan for an electronic scanning server similar to, I mean, he's a brilliant dude. There's no question about his intellectual acumen. But man, he is a piece of work. That's the other piece that's real interesting. And sometimes people can just be so brazen. And I wish more people, even when people were talking about the choice between Schimel and Crawford, to talk about the fact that the reason that Elon Musk has interjected himself into the Wisconsin race is because he has some court cases that will probably end up at the Supreme Court here in Wisconsin that benefits him. What it is right now is he cannot have a Tesla dealership here in Wisconsin because of Wisconsin state law, and he's challenging that law to be allowed to do Tesla. Though at this point, he's killed his sales. The Tesla stock has dropped dramatically. People are turning their Teslas back in, because the Tesla was an electric car, which meant that you were probably a progressive if you're really down for electric cars, as opposed to the cars, the combustion engine cars. And so the fact that Trump had to basically turn the White House, I don't know if that's the West Lawn there, into a Tesla dealership, encouraging people to buy the car. Who was it? Senator Kelly from Arizona owned a Tesla. He took it back. But follow the money. Follow the money. It's always about the money, and that you interject yourself into a state Supreme Court race, and people would go, "Oh man, why is he doing that?" Well, part of it is that it's based on his bottom line and his self-interest, that he wants to be able to sell Teslas in Wisconsin. I don't know how big of a market it would be here. I do know that the Trump administration has cut down some of these federal charging stations that you have in terms of electric cars. So I don't know, there are people out there who are pushing back on the so-called New Green Deal that was, proffered under the Biden administration. That's the other thing about, the climate. Dude, we're doing damage to the climate. And, yesterday we were giving out water bottles. And one of the selling points I had to some people was giving it to said, you reduce your carbon footprint. I'm always talking about the amount of plastics that we have out there, because look, it is still the fossil fuel industry who wants us to continue to consume plastics, certainly to have cars that use gasoline, all these things where they're making money. Now, I don't know if Elon Musk understands that the person that he is working for has no real loyalty. And part of it was real easy to put Elon Musk out with his whole Doge folks talking about, hey, we're going to go in and find fraud and inefficiency in government, and we're going to cut government politically, then the blowback goes to Elon Musk. It does not go to Donald Trump. And it really should go to Donald Trump. Right. And so Donald Trump, and then once it gets hot, and then Elon Musk can only do this, I think, for 130, 160 days anyway. So when he said that he's going to be winding down in May. Plus, they have not found the waste that allegedly they thought was in the programs. And then you go and you cut expertise. Now, when we start talking about people for laying off staff at the Center for Disease Control, why is that important? Right now, we're dealing with a measles outbreak. We haven't had a measles outbreak this bad in years because we controlled measles through vaccination. There is the Food and Drug Administration, right? These are people who go out to make sure that the drugs that you use are safe, that the food that you eat is safe. If you cut down on the number of inspectors, that means that then businesses can do and cut corners and cut corners in order to then put unsafe products out there, unsafe food out there for folks. And then you have, we got Center for Disease Control, the FDA. And then how about this? And for some people, they'll talk about just how bad that earthquake was. And I can never pronounce the name of this country. It's Myanmar. But the apparatus to go in to provide that disaster aid was cut when they closed down USAID. So what these folks have been able to do in about 70 days, and someone mentioned that sometimes, you break it, how do you put it back together? That becomes the issue. And so the collateral damage that's going to be done, or the direct damage that's going to be done by a lot of these things, and a lot of these things in the administration is, like, for example, maybe this is more of an emotional, intellectual piece in terms of when you go in and you say that you're erasing history, and how people, I wonder, are there Black people out there, though, who support Trump, who clearly understand what that means? That when we have a history that, look, the Civil War was the Civil War. And even then, people have kind of sanitized it, try to make it sound like it wasn't that bad. It wasn't about slavery. It was about slavery. Not to say that necessarily the people in the North, they were a little better. And part of it was the people in the North weren't dependent on slave labor in order to be economically successful. So if you're running a farm in Wisconsin, you don't want slaves. You don't need slaves. The way that farming is done in Wisconsin, as opposed to a crop like cotton that requires an enormous amount of care. That's chopping cotton comes from cleaning the weeds away from the base of the plant so it don't choke the plant. They had human beings out there doing that. I've chopped cotton. Understand the concept behind it. So there were reasons. When I found out that you had abolitionists who were violently opposed to enslavement, yet had a problem with seeing descendants of Africans or African people as equal. Part of what we're dealing with right now is do you have this number? Let's do this. We're waiting on Congresswoman Gwen Moore to call in. So you want to take a break, and we'll get her on the line. You're listening to Community Voice. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Donald Trump is out of control, stopping payments for healthcare and food for hungry kids, eliminating the Department of Education, and letting Elon Musk access your most private information. Now Trump and Musk are backing Brad Schimmel because they know he'll let them do whatever they want. Not Judge Susan Crawford. She'll be the check and balance we need to protect us from Trump when he goes too far. That's why we need Judge Susan Crawford on the Supreme Court.
FM with your host, Keith Parris.
All right, welcome back. Thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome back. We are on the line with us, Congresswoman Gwen Moore. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Keith. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I sure can.
All right.
I don't know if you heard, but today is election day.
Today is election day, and fortunately, I have cast my vote early, so I am being counted. Of course, I didn't get one of those $1 million checks, but I was still incentivized to vote, and my vote means a lot.
Okay, so and I'm trying not to, just sound, trite, but why is this election important?
Well, this election is important. I think Elon Musk said it well. He thinks it's going to change the course of history, or something very profound. He said, the direction of the country. Right now, Republicans are running the ship, and they are ceding all of the power of Congress to the president, enabling him to do numbers of things we don't have enough time to discuss, of how he's wrecking and robbing and confusing people with his policies, really putting everyone in the country, all of our businesses and individuals and Medicaid and Medicare at risk, and on and on and on. But he's being able to do that because Republicans have the trifecta in terms of having the presidency, both the United States Senate and the U.S. House. And we win a majority on this court. It's very likely that one of the before this court is the question of redistricting. Even that we have, Wisconsin has had most of the most gerrymandered maps in the country. And while there's Mark Pocan and I who represent the state in Congress, we should have a minimum of 2 more seats. And if there were fair maps that were not gerrymandered, we have 8 seats altogether, and it is totally mismatched. It's because of the gerrymander that there are only 2 seats out of the 8. That's one thing. Secondly, the ability to bargain collectively and to be able to join in a union, to collectively bargain for wages, for benefits like health care and pension costs because of Act 10. With a new majority on the state Supreme Court, it's very possible that lawsuit could come up again. Can you hear me, Keith?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. The 1849 ban on abortion. Brad Schimmel, when he was Attorney General, he wasted $1 million suing and supporting the most right-wing policies against an abortion. And he would support the 1849 ban with no exceptions for health of the mother, for rape. And this is something that ought to terrify everyone, to lose control of their own body. Just to mention a few things.
Is this race, both for Department of Public Instruction superintendent and the Supreme Court, do you think it's partially a referendum on the Trump administration?
Well, if it is, that should bode well for us, if in fact it is. It's called a bellwether election because I think nationally Democrats are looking to see what happens in Wisconsin to sort of predict, quite frankly, whether or not we can actually win back support for Democrats as they see the contrast between Democrats and Republicans. So I do think that people are looking at this as a bellwether. Matter of fact, this is the most expensive state Supreme Court race in the history of the country. And it's not just that Elon Musk himself has put $20 million in by himself, but it has attracted donors from all over. And thank God we have a lot of small donors in our sphere that really nationally, that really see this as a bellwether election.
You had, I think you had two that, and you were going to come on and talk about it, but schedules got a little crazy, where you've had town halls. What are you getting, or what are you hearing when you've had those town halls and you've faced your constituents?
Well, I have had town halls, and the most recent one was last weekend, and it wasn't actually a town hall meeting because it was sponsored by the Democratic Party of Waukesha County.
Okay.
So I went out to Waukesha, and the room was packed, standing room only, and the people really articulated the same kinds of things that they talked about in Marshall High School and in West Dallas. That people are very concerned about the future of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. They're very, very concerned about the attempts at privatizing the Veterans Administration as well as Social Security. They're very concerned about this wreck, rob, break strategy that Elon Musk has, his unfettered access. And really, you know, here's a private citizen, a naturalized private citizen who has access to the most sensitive information. Every single person in the United States' Social Security number has been accessed by Elon Musk. Here's a person who was elected to nothing. He hasn't gone through any kind of United States Senate confirmation process. He hasn't filled out any ethics statements that the rest of us have to. He doesn't have to disclose any of his conflicts of interest. Just recently, he got a $38 million contract with the government. And of course, that would be prohibitive to any other employee of the federal government. And so, you know, I was just on the elevator mentioning to one of my colleagues who's on the Judiciary Committee, Hank Johnson from Georgia, that Elon Musk passed out $2 million checks last night, and his only response is he needs to be in jail, period. And so he's committing crime and state crimes, which of course can't be forgiven by Donald Trump. Our Attorney General, our state Attorney General, Josh Call, filed some paperwork to stop him from giving the $1 million away. And, you know, something technical prevented him from filing that to prohibit Elon Musk from giving away those $1 million checks. But hopefully that will not, win, lose, or draw this contest, hopefully that will not stop our state Attorney General from pursuing justice around this clear campaign, state campaign violation. If it's a federal campaign violation, you know, Trump will just pardon him. So I'm hoping that Josh Call will pursue this at a state level.
You're on the Ways and Means Committee, and I have been telling folks that, you know, we're kind of distracted over here with the okie doke, the whole we're looking for fraud, waste, and abuse, and all of that. But there is, and you're going to have to deal with some legislation around tax cuts, which kind of gets us to why Medicaid and possibly Social Security could be in peril, because somehow you have to pay for those tax cuts.
Okay, well, listen, I'm just going to reframe this a little bit. I don't want to call them tax cuts. You know, it's a giveaway to the wealthy. It's what it is. Because while you know, the greatest proportion of this billionaire giveaway goes to the 1% of taxpayers. Anything that people who are your listeners would get would be literally crumbs from the master's table. And if you were to get a tax break of $150 in your refund check, that would not be worth it if you were to lose Medicaid, if you were to lose SNAP, if you were to, lose your prescription drugs insulin being capped at $35 a month. That would not compensate for the loss of federal funding to our schools. That would not compensate for the amount of the prices of cars going up with these tariffs, with food prices going through the roof. That $150 that you might get, as a middle-class working person. In other words, the squeeze is not worth the juice. And it's not a tax. It's a billionaire giveaway, which is why you see the billionaires lined up to support it.
I think that when, you can do things that emotionally resonate with people, and we hear things like fraud and abuse, well, whose normal thinking would not be against fraud and abuse. The interesting thing is that they have not been able to present any numbers. I think they were talking about like they'd be able to find $1 trillion. They have not. What is that about?
Well, let me just start out, Keith, and I hope my constituents will forgive me because I was very inappropriate when the president was giving his speech during the joint session. When he started saying that people on Social Security, there were people 150 years old who were getting Social Security, people who were 300 years old getting Social Security. I shouted out, "That's a lie," because it really is a lie, and he knew it was a lie. Social Security has a 0.84%, less than 1% error rate.
Right.
And so that is not true. Social Security already has strong anti-fraud protections and harsh penalties go after these fraudulent people. Like I said, the payment accuracy is 99.8%, and fraud is rare. But they're calling it a pansy scheme because they actually want. And we had Paul Ryan from our state when he ran with Mitt Romney, who was honest about it. They want to privatize Social Security. Mm-hmm. They think people would be better off in the private market with Social Security instead of this being a payroll tax. That's their opinion. But it's a guaranteed benefit, and it's not being put at risk by putting it in the stock market. And what they have done with the 2025 CR that we just passed, I'm not talking about the budget reconciliation that we're going to be dealing with, but the thing that they just passed, in order for the administration of Social Security to have been flat funded, they would have had to have given it a $600 million a year increase. But instead of doing that, they not only did not give it the $600 million increase, but they cut another $100 million. So that's $700 million less than needed to keep up with the administration of Social Security. The employees at Social Security are at a 50-year low. And the reason that that's important, Keith, is because baby boomers, and I'm one of the baby boomers, 10,000 baby boomers today turn 65. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be every day for almost a decade. Mm-hmm. Why would you, at a point with your biggest surge in customers, who need Social Security, why would you choose this time to cut back on staffing, to close offices? So when they say we're not touching Social Security, I would offer to people some of the wisdom from Rachel Maddow. Look at what they're doing, not what they're saying. After 90 years of Social Security operating, we have not missed a single payment. But the Trump administration has warned that in this interim, there might be. Martin O'Malley has warned the former commissioner of Social Security that we might see some benefit interruptions for the first time in the 90 year. And of course, the president did say it's going to be paying for a little while. So there's no question that Social Security is one of their targets. I remember I'm on the Joint Economic Committee as well. And I remember just last session questioning Mick Mulvaney, one of Donald Trump's chief of staff during the first Trump term. And we asked them why they were going after Social Security. And his response was, hey, why did Jesse James rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Social Security is where the money is. And so that to him was an explanation of why they wanted to unwind Social Security.
You just heard, because even though Elon Musk made a visit to defense, I don't know if there are any weapon systems or other things that would be on the chopping block, in terms, and if we want to find waste, fraud, and abuse, just look at the defense budget.
Well, I'll tell you something. I think the defense budget is the only thing that will be spared any of their cuts, because they really do want to create a military regime. But I will say this. What is more frightening about that is that they're cutting, they're into the CIA, the FBI, to national security. They want to demote a lot of generals and get rid of them. So it's their DEI initiative. Think about it. Before we had what will I call the scandal, the Signalgate scandal, where they had this, signal being used for very sensitive, if not classified information. They fired a very, very qualified joint chief of staff. But of course, he kind of looked like you, Keith. He had that melanin that you have and the intellect that you have. And they said that he was unqualified because of DEI. So they put all the rest of these bumbling fools in there. And so these are the kind of people that are losing their positions. And, what you need for a good military, I think, is a good morale. So they're taking off their website, you remember they took Jackie Robinson off, who had been in the military. They since claimed he's back up, but I don't know that Colin Powell is back. They're stripping down, the Arlington National Cemetery, African Americans who have been buried there. And so I really do think that they're destroying the military in lots of other ways other than money. They're stripping the morale and diversity. And of course, the military is doing the best they can to push back because they actually need DEI. I mean, think about it. If you're the military or if you're the CIA and you want to go into an African country, for example, you can't send a white man in there if you're doing an undercover operation. You can't send a white man into an Asian country or or someone who's not a Russian speaker. You need DEI to really function and operate. So the military is really, really fighting back.
And even the affirmative action case, I think it was the Michigan case or either the Harvard case, there was is that called an amicus brief that the U.S. military had attached to that particular court case, and the Supreme Court did a carve out for the military academies because of understanding
exactly because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's all kinds of documentation that DEI really benefits the thinking process. If you're trying anything, you need, like somebody will say, can you take a second look at this, put another eye on it? People with diverse experiences really bring better products to the market.
Well, I think and I heard a great descriptive of it, because the reality is, even under affirmative action, it gives you access. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be successful. So everybody who gets into Harvard still has to do everything Harvard requires in order to get a degree from Harvard. That little piece. But they pointed something I hadn't even thought about, and being a college recruiter, I should have thought about this, a former college recruiter, that what DEI was saying is that we will go to places that people normally would not go to get a more diverse pool of candidates to come in and work. It is not saying that you lower any standards. What it's saying is that your outreach is going to be different. It's not like the Army is not doing outreach when they do their advertising on television and on radio. So it's the same thing. It's expanding the pool of people and expanding, and then being able to capture the talent of that expanded pool of individuals.
It is. I mean, you take somebody like Steve Jobs, who was a genius, somebody who was adopted. I mean, his parents were grad students, I guess, in Wisconsin at UW-Madison. But he grew up. Where did Steve Jobs grow up?
He was out in California.
I think so.
Yeah.
But he's somebody who had to drop out of college.
Was he at Stanford or was he at Cal? I know he was. Let me see where Steve Jobs was. Yeah, you're right.
He had to drop out because his parents couldn't afford for him to finish. I mean, this is what you lose when you don't give the universities the ability to sift through their students. I mean, if you are only going to take rich kids, you're not going to get Steve Jobs.
And you're not going to get a lot of people.
Right.
So
you're not going to get enough people.
There you go. Go. It's fascinating when we look at the times that we're living in, and who would have ever thought? Well, of course, we should have thought that there wouldn't be some pushback, there wouldn't be any blowback. Let's see. He went to Reed College.
Yeah, he went to Reed.
Okay, Reed College. I don't know where that is.
Exactly. He went to Reed College, and his parents couldn't even afford that. Okay. And that wasn't even Harvard.
Yeah, Reed College is in Portland, Oregon.
Right. So that if you're just recruiting people from the East Coast, or from all the kids are just, getting the 4.0s in high school, and they got, their legacy students, you don't get Steve Jobs. You just don't. You take Duke University, changing the subject a little bit, that rejected Michael Jordan. For college.
Yeah.
You got to dig a little bit deeper to get the talent. And just because you got rejected from the junior varsity in your high school doesn't mean that if someone gave you a second look and they got around the DEI, that they wouldn't discover a Michael Jordan. So it's just.
It's interesting because they also
our university.
They also wouldn't recruit Steph Curry because they thought he was too little. Duke University.
Right.
Get me started on Duke.
Exactly.
And tomorrow I'll have the opportunity of You are an alum of Marquette University?
I definitely am.
And so the incoming president, I'll have a chance to have a conversation with him tomorrow. And I just saw how about this? I don't know how this lined up. UWM has just named a black chancellor.
Come on now. The institutions are trying to reflect the community.
Well, I think that fear now that they're trying to silence dissenting the voices and going after colleges in terms of hitting them in the pocketbooks. And really, I think trying to trample down dissent and an attack on free speech when it comes to colleges we should be very frightened by that.
We should be very frightened. This is straight out of the oligarchy, tyrannical playbook. I mean, this comes straight out of that playbook. I mean, censoring material, censoring free thought and free speech. I mean, watch out. I mean, the signposts are ahead. You're entering Twilight Zone.
All right. Congresswoman Gwenmore, we thank you. Always great talking with you.
Voted said it ain't too late.
There you go.
Don't give up. Don't give up in advance. Get out and vote for Susan Crawford for Supreme Court Justice and vote no on that referendum. Kill underlings for school superintendent.
Thank you, Congresswoman
Gwen. For Lena Taylor. She's uncontested.
That'll be a tight race, right? Thank you, Congresswoman Moore. Let me thank Congresswoman Moore again for being part of the team. Here's a little thing about Reed College I didn't know. Since the 1960s, Reed has had a reputation for tolerating open drug use among its students.
Oh my!
Yeah, wow. Talk about an institution of higher education.
So how much that is? How much that is?
Hey, Devo, thank you. Jermaine, thank you. We'll see everybody this afternoon at 3 o'clock for Election Central. The good Lord willing, Creek don't rise. I hope to see you then, and go from this place in peace.